Welcome to this week's edition of Bob versus Willie. This is the show, quite simply, that is Bob Gersten versus myself, Willie Witten, where weekly I have to introduce Bob to the finer points of music that he has not picked up. Today, I'll be educating him, of course, on Bob. What are we talking about today?
Steve Miller.
And his best 10 songs. Bob, should you start or should I?
All right. Well, I picked Living in the USA. Living in the USA came out on the Sailor album way back in 1968, and it was a radio hit. In fact, that was the only song I knew by him when I saw him open for the Iron Butterfly in 1969 at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago.
I know that place, Bob. My number 10 is Cow Cow. Sometimes it's listed on previous releases as Cow Cow Calculator. That is off of Brave New World, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I like it. It's sort of got his 3-chord format of that era that he sort of reverts to. For number 9, I have I wouldn't call it epic, but the longer Baby's House, which I think it's an almost 9-minute tune. It's an interesting song. It goes through a bunch of different phases. Who do you got for number 9 and 8, Bob?
Well, for number 9, I have Mercury Blues. And Mercury Blues was a regular thing that Steve used to play all the time. When first time I ever saw him, he played it. He used to jam on it for, 15, sometimes 20 minutes. And it was a great song the way he would do it. It's a short version when he has it on the album. And he didn't even record it on the album until Fly Like an Eagle, which was 7 years after that. Then number 8 is The Joker. Now, The Joker was his first number 1 hit. I don't particularly care for The Joker myself, but it's an important song because it came off the Joker album, which was his first number 1 hit and pretty much catapulted him.
Those are pretty good picks. I agree with that. I think you might have Joker a little bit low. My number 8, you've already mentioned it, Living in the USA. Nothing else to say there. You've already covered it. Number 7 for me is a song called Little Girl. I picked this song. It's once again a lesser known song. For me, it's important because it's the first time we really get to hear that sort of double tracked, what has become the iconic Steve Miller voice. So that's why I have that at number 7. Bob, what do you have at 7-6?
Well, for 7, I have Fly Like an Eagle.
Okay.
And that was his 9th album. It was quadruple platinum. And at the same time, that's the one that really got him really going into the big time. And number 6 was Going to the Country. Now, Going to the Country used to be my all-time favorite song, but at the same time, I'm not judging them just based on what my favorite song is. But when I saw it, it was off of number 5, the album called Number 5. And the first 5 albums had the drummer, Tim Davis. Now, Tim was the most amazing drummer I ever saw. When he left the band, it's like I actually cried about it. And the thing is, the album had a lot of good stuff, and Going to the Country was the best song off it, I felt.
Okay, so I've got, for my number 6, I've got Rockin' Me. I feel like that's a song that a lot of people know. That's sort of that middle period of Steve Miller, probably his most commercially successful era. I think it's one of his best tunes from that era. Number 5, I have Roll With It. Roll With It is off of the first album, Children of the Future. It's a very brief song, but what I find really engaging about it, besides I think it's a great song, is that during that song, he is awfully psychedelic in his playing, which you don't hear later in his career. So what do you got, Bob?
Well, for number 5, I have Space Cowboy. Now, Space Cowboy came on Brave New World, the 3rd album. And when I saw him that first time, he was actually previewing that album. It hadn't even come out yet. And Space Cowboy is obviously about the space race because of the fact that we had the moon landing just a few months after the album came out. And for number 4, My Dark Hour. Now, My Dark Hour is also off of Brave New World. Now, that song was made with Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney is not credited on the album. He's actually credited with another name. And the thing is that they were jamming together because the Beatles were breaking up at that time and they were recording, and Paul ended up storming out and everybody else left. And then he came over and jammed with Steve Miller.
Sounds like a rather Paul thing to do. For my number 4, I have Fly Like an Eagle. I feel like that, if I remember correctly, in my opinion, with that riff is perhaps the better version of My Dark Hour. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot borrowed between the two songs. My number 3 is The Joker. Once again, I'm not saying it's his best, but it's so important. It's the song that I think he'll be remembered for the most. What do you got for 3 and 2?
Well, for 3, I have a song that a lot of people will probably not like. It's Abracadabra.
I do not like it. You are right with that.
I think that Abracadabra is an important song. Again, it was another number 1 song for him. But the reason it's really important is because at that time, we still had the Eastern Bloc communism with the Soviet Union and East Germany and all that. And they actually had that on the radio in East Germany and in Russia. It was a hit.
How about number 2? What do you got?
Oh, number 2, I got I Want to Make the World Turn Around. And that was coming on Living in the 20th Century, which came out in 1986. Now, on that album, that particular song, I mean, he does a really great guitar jam on it. And he invited Kenny G, who was not really known at that time, to appear on the album, and they did kind of a duet together, and it was kind of like Springsteen and Clemens it was that sort of a thing, and I think it was one of the best things that he did for quite a while.
I may take a little bit of disagreement with that, Bob, but I'll give you my last 2. Number 2, I go with, I guess it would be Jet Airliner. I think it's just got a great groove to it. I think that's his best song of that Book of Dreams era, that iconic horse logo era. I think that's his best of the bunch. And you already mentioned my number 1, Bob. I do think it's his best, Going to the Country. When he goes into that 3-chord reprise at the end, I think it's a great avenue for him to play guitar. So with that being said, what is your possible best song by Stevie Guitar Miller?
Well, I picked Rockin' Me. And
Really?
the reason why I picked Rockin' Me is because that song represented his success to him. Because when he wrote it, it was because he had graduated from appearing at mid-size halls to appearing in stadiums with 50 to 100,000 people. And that was the song that he sang to them and was singing to himself at the same time. He was rocking it at that point.
That's true. You know what? I wouldn't be my number 1 song. I don't think it's bad. And I think I don't love I Want to Make the World as number 2. I mean, I don't think it's a bad song. I think that's awfully high. Like you said, and you called it before, I'm going to go into this, so I won't dive too hard into it. But I mean, I understand they were playing it over in the Eastern Bloc, but Abracadabra at number 3 of all places, Bob. You couldn't have put that at maybe 9 or 10?
I felt it was too important. I mean, I felt it was part of what cracked communism in East Germany and in Russia. It's like there's a book written and it's called Rock Around the Block. And it came out after the Soviet Union fell, and the guy that wrote it based the book on all the KGB files that he was allowed to go through that dealt with the attitude of music in Russia. And it is mind-boggling how much influence rock and roll had and how it finally collapsed the Soviet Union. I believe that rock and roll collapsed communism in the Soviet Union.
I could agree with that. I'd say add in blue jeans and also McDonald's, and you've got a perfect trifecta of a way to take down the communists. Really, better than weapons. The other thing I would comment on, I think all the rest of yours I really agree with. Something just in general, besides the lists and our respective differences, I find it interesting when he talks about Space Cowboy, when he talks about, I Want to Make the World. I don't think he gets a lot of credit for this, but his songs are a bit more topical than I think most people think of, because I think most people just think of that Stevie Miller's greatest hits album, right? We all know which one we're talking about. But if you look at some of his earlier stuff and then later stuff, he's far more topical, I think, than most people give him credit for.
Well, he had a lot to say, but at the same time, he used to put it in a succinct song. Well, you take the song number 1, "Living in the USA," or song number 10, I should say. That song was a very political song. The funny thing about it is, when you hear him sing it today, he says we're living in a fantastic land. When he sang it back then and on the original album, it's we're living in a plastic land. And plastic at that point was a very derogatory term. It meant phony, hypocrite.
Well, Bob, thank you. Your list definitely gave me some education. I didn't know the backstories, even though I think, once again, if we check the scores table, I won yet again. Bob, once again, you are getting closer. That is all the time we have for today. For Bob Gersten, I'm Willie Witten. We'll see you next time on Bob versus Willie.